Friend, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. You know, you saw three people walking out, Glenn, Joyce, and Joan, and they weren't protesting service. They were going and they are guarding the latkes downstairs. I mean, they're guarding them. So you have to go down for one of the guarded latkes downstairs. Wherever Jews have lived, they have needed to adjust to society. They needed to accept the society and make it part of them. And for example, Jews at one time didn't embrace Thanksgiving. There was concern that it wasn't really something Jews should do, but eventually every Orthodox sage in America decided Thanksgiving is okay. Rabbi Joshua Plout wrote a book. I don't know how much money it made. It's rather expensive, but you can get it as one of the remainders on Amazon for $1.98. I've never spoken about this. It's called A Kosher Christmas, 'Tis the Season to be Jewish. And just wait. So this is a very serious book. I mean, it's a very serious book. I don't know Rabbi Plout, but I want to focus in on chapter 3 of the book, okay? Which says, we eat Chinese food on Christmas. So where does this come from? So there was an interview with Rabbi Plout with Robert Siegel of NPR. And he shared the following information. And no one knows this. I mean, no one knows this except Rabbi Plout and a few people who read the book, and now you. At least since 1935, according to the New York Times, which cites that a man by the name of Eng Shi Chuk brought chow mein on Christmas Day to the Jewish Children's Home in Newark, New Jersey. That is the first written citations of Jews eating Chinese food on Christmas. So Robert Siegel then says it's either discovery by Jews of Chinese food on Christmas or discovery of Jewish customers by Chinese restaurants. So Plout says probably both. And then he goes on to say, he says, actually, Jews eating in Chinese restaurants goes back to 1899, when the American Jewish Journal, a weekly publication, criticized Jews for eating at non-kosher restaurants and singling out, in particular, Jews who flocked to Chinese restaurants. So that you can't make this stuff up. So this marriage between Chinese and between Jews and Chinese food really goes back to when Jews and Chinese people were immigrants to the United States. They were both part of the immigrant experience. So then he goes on to say, well, there's something, the Hebrew word for something that's non-kosher is treif. So there's a term in American Jewish culture called safe treif. Okay, so what does that mean? This explains why even very traditional Jews end up starting eating Chinese food. This is unbelievable. This is deep. Someone can get a PhD in anthropology with what we're sharing today. Jews in Chinese restaurants are eating all the sorts of non-kosher foods, such as shellfish, pork products, which are hidden in a wonton or something like an egg roll. So if you hide it, it's okay. And so you're able to partake in this wonderful delicacy without actually knowingly eating something you shouldn't be eating. Also, in Chinese restaurants, there's no use of milk. So this is a place you can engage in eating this food, and seemingly it's okay, but in reality it isn't. Honestly, now this gets really interesting. Plout goes on to say, Chinese restaurant was a haven for American Jews who felt like outsiders on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And if you go into the Chinese restaurant, you become an insider. So just think about it. It's hard to understand in our world, but go back to when my grandparents came to America, early part of the 20th century. And you're coming in and you're a stranger in that world. And the Chinese are kind of strangers. You become connected to each other in your strangeness. It's a really beautiful, beautiful idea and a very interesting idea. Okay, I'm going to get away from that. So here's a question that was raised in the Reform movement in 1972 by a synagogue, the Men's Club of a synagogue in Detroit. And the issue was raised about us as Jews substituting for Christians in order for them to celebrate Christmas. And here's the question. The question is, that year, this is 1972, when it was asked to Rabbi Solomon Freehoff, who is the great religious law authority for the Reform movement for many generations. He was a rabbi at a major synagogue in Pittsburgh. So Rabbi Freehoff was asked this question. That year, Christmas fell on Shabbat, and questions arose in the Detroit community as to whether it was proper for a Jewish congregation to violate the Sabbath, to volunteer to help Christian friends who needed replacements. Since then, other men's clubs are planning to volunteer for such duties on Christmas. And this has raised a lot of issues. One is, first, about the Sabbath, and second of all, is this a value that we should be encouraging, substituting for people on Christmas? So there are one or two general statements which must be made. First of all, it is permissible in some situations to violate the Sabbath in order to do good in the world. That's number one. Number two, he says, if you're going to do it, don't do it so publicly, do it privately. We'll skip that issue. But then the issue becomes, what I want to deal with this evening is, what exactly are we trying to do when we go into the world and volunteer and help our Christian neighbors who might need some assistance on, for example, give me an example. What could you do for somebody who... Okay, we're going to get there. So shovel snow. No, that's a good idea. Okay, you celebrate Christmas, I'm going to shovel your sidewalk. I'm not, that's a really interesting issue. So here's what Rabbi Freehoff says. It must be recorded that the motivation which led the men's club and leads other men's clubs to such help to Christians is a well-established, honored motivation since ancient time. There are both the negative motive to avoid ill will, mishum eva, but the principle that's most important is b'nei darchei shalom. You do things in order to promote good in the world. And this principle is we do certain things because they promote good in the world. We get along, we put ourselves out for people outside of our community because it promotes a better world, because it elevates us personally. It's what I call a goodwill principle. And then he goes on to say, so what are some of the things that you potentially should do? And he goes on to say things that are what he refers to, what sort of activities is most suitable for this expression of goodwill? Doing what he would call social services today. In other words, helping the non-Jewish poor, feeding them, visiting the ill. And it goes on and on and on, saying this is a value that we are supposed to be promoting. So where am I going with this? Every year, I do something personal. And I'm not doing this to brag, because I'm so righteous. I'm not so righteous. But it's something I really believe in, and I think it's based on this Jewish principle, mipnei darchei shalom. I am a certified chaplain. I have my certification. And one of the things that I do every year, and I'm going to do it tomorrow night, is I'm going to volunteer in the hospital overnight so there won't have to be, my Christian chaplains won't have to work. And I do it, again, because I believe in the fact that we, first of all, need to do good in the world, but there's something else that's important. You know, tomorrow night, who knows what's going to happen? And with such cold weather, a lot of people come in, and it's really horrible. Homeless people, It's really not a pleasant sight to be at the hospital when it's so cold. I want people to see that this man walking around with his yarmulke on Christmas Eve, this Jewish man, is doing this. And he's doing it because of Mipnei Darchei Shalom, because he's dedicated to the fact that he wants to live in a world where people of different faiths work with each other. I mean, it's such an, we can get up, and I've gotten up here and said all kinds of things about, we need to work together. We all have this vision of people of all faiths working together in America and being here together in America. But if we don't somehow show it in some specific way, then our words don't mean anything. So I'm sharing this with you, first of all, Mipnei Darchei Shalom. We need to live in a world where we are looking out for each other and supporting each other and it happens all the year round. And second of all, I want people to know that we as a Jewish community are dedicated to this, because we also want our Christian and Muslim friends to be sensitive to us when we are in need of that. That's how you build a society. That's how you build peace in this world. And the fact of the matter is that, it says in the book of Luke, I don't usually quote the New Testament, it says, on Luke chapter 2, verse 13 through 14, it says, "And suddenly there was with an angel a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men.'" So I'm going to steal Luke's comment and put it in Jewish terms. We have to do what we can to bring peace and goodwill to all humankind. Shabbat Shalom.